So to kind of kick us off, I kind of would like to ask each of you to just kind of introduce yourself and talk about your community, your area as it relates to transportation.
Okay, I'll start. Shawn Reilly, Mayor City of Waukesha. About myself, grew up in Waukesha, so basically lived there my whole life except for periods of time when I lived in San Diego and Portland, Oregon, which both had pretty good transportation systems. The Portland, Oregon one I used a lot because I was going to law school and I worked at Bonneville Power Administration, so I was able to take their rail system from school all the way to probably about 6-7 miles away and use that every single day, which kind of made me really appreciate that type of transportation. City of Waukesha, we do have a 24/7, well, no, we don't have a 24/7. Hang on, let me grab my notes that Brian put together for me so I do not say anything wrong about our Waukesha Metro Transit. It's not, as far as transportation systems go, it's not enormous, but it does serve the entire city of Waukesha. It operates 7 days a week. We have 10 weekday routes, which are reduced on nights and weekends. We provide service to Brookfield as well as WCTC, which is in Milwaukee. We have a Metro Lift, which is paratransit. We have a transit center that has 13 bays, waiting room, restrooms, customer service, ticket vending. We also administrated the Waukesha County Transit System. Our ridership is pre-COVID was 600,000 people a year. And initially I didn't think that was that much, but you divide it by the number of days in the year and it actually is pretty significant. And pre-COVID, our ridership was increasing. Post-COVID, we're hoping to recover. We are seeing steady growth, but we're still pretty far. We're about 60% of where we were pre-COVID. 60. Yeah, that's 60. Thank God Brian's right in front of me. We are working on a 5-year transit development plan with SewerPAC, where there's a feasibility study as to whether BRT elements are included in Waukesha. So not so much that BRT comes to Waukesha, but that we hook up to the BRT at the regional center. Also, we're doing a lot of technology type of enhancements, which are making it much easier for the people sitting at the bus stop, trying to know exactly when the bus is going to come. So that's where I'll stop.
Awesome.
In Wauwatosa, we have always been, as far back as I can remember, connected to the Milwaukee County transit systems. I live in a neighborhood that is the first streetcar suburb neighborhood of Milwaukee County. If you come into Wauwatosa and you come down Wells Street, you'll say, well, it's really a wide street from the freeway all the way down to 68th Street. And then it gets real narrow. Why is that? But because the first streetcar that ever left the city of Milwaukee in 1892 came down Wells Street and then turned down 68th and went down into the Wauwatosa Village area.
Were you there?
I was not quite there. But actually, sadly, my father was a Milwaukee Journal reporter for 42 years, and the people who lived across the street were on the last streetcar ride, which went from Wauwatosa in 1958 back downtown, the number 10 line, which turned into the number 10 bus line, which turned into the Gold Line, and I took the Gold Line here today. So in my scrapbook that my mother lovingly kept, we have a picture, the story of the Hopes taking the last streetcar ride, and that's always been, my parents always thought that was a very sad moment. They passed that along to me. As you probably know, the Wisconsin Electric Power Company building used to be the great hub, and the Milwaukee Road Station was right there. And I remember taking a train to Spokane, Washington in 1965, leaving from the old Milwaukee Road Station, and when I returned, I came back to the new station. So I've seen these transit changes, and some of them have been good, most of them have not been good. What I'm excited about is the BRT. And at the Common Council, before I became mayor, I was probably the strongest proponent of the BRT line. Studies for many years have said the three major sources of traffic in the Milwaukee area are UWM, downtown Milwaukee, and the Regional Medical Center. We still aren't going to be connecting UWM with the BRT, but that'll come. I'm sure of it. But we are connecting downtown Milwaukee with the Regional Medical Center in Wauwatosa. And people don't understand how important that is. Mayfair Mall, pre-pandemic, 16 million people a year came to Mayfair Mall. 16 million people a year. That's like filling American Family Field every day for 365 days a year. That's just Mayfair Mall. The Regional Medical Center probably is not quite that, but pretty close. Imagine all those trips coming in and out of the Regional Medical Center. When I started as an alderman in 2008, we were starting to talk about the new zoo interchange. And a lot of that was because of what's going on at the medical center and what's going on at Mayfair Mall. So Wauwatosa is a major generator of traffic. And unfortunately, the Department of Transportation didn't listen to us on the Common Council, and we said, please don't widen those roads out there. And Mayfair Road is turning into a mini freeway, and Watertown Plank Road is horrible. We've got to reverse that. We can't keep widening our roads because there's no more room to widen. I should have started by saying when I went to UWM, I took the old U bus. I was one of the first U bus riders, if you remember that. And when I was in Washington, D.C. For a summer, I was one of the first Metro riders there. I happened to be there in 1977. I lived in Boston and New York and New Jersey, and I was an ardent rider of transit there, too. So my passion for transit goes way back, and I'll just finish by saying this, that in graduate school in New Jersey, I studied transportation and became enamored of the notion of transit-oriented development. And we're going to talk about that, I'm sure, today. So I'll pass it along to my friend Trevor here, and he can talk about that.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Dave, for facilitating this excellent event. I feel like I'm better at my job every time I see Dave because he puts together such an incredible event with great groups of people who have so much knowledge. And thank you, Donna, for being really a role model in this industry. And thank you to all the elected officials who are here. As a director of transit and mobility for the city of Racine, my job is a whole lot easier when the Common Council and the mayor say this is a priority. And we are very much privileged in the city of Racine to have Mayor Corey Mason, who has made transit central to the work that he does, just like our mayors on this panel today. Before I was the director of transit mobility for the city of Racine, I served on the city council for 2 terms, elected at the age of 22. And the reason I ran was because of my education at UW Milwaukee, where...
I hate these guys that make me feel old.
Yes. So when I was at UWM, which is a real regional gift, since we're talking about regional gifts, I learned about the intersection between equity, growth, and transportation. And there's one thing that I love most. It's my hometown. But just like Milwaukee, Racine has a series of opportunities and a series of challenges. A former president once said there's nothing wrong with America that can't be fixed with what's right with America. That's the similar story about Milwaukee, similar story about Racine. Racine is right between Milwaukee and Chicago, historic downtown, award-winning architecture, one of the top 10 freshwater beaches in the country, a diverse population. We speak over 60 languages in our public schools. And we are Invention City, more patents per capita than anywhere else in the world at the time of industrialization. And the reason that Racine was set up for that is because it was regionally connected. Racine was connected by rail between Milwaukee and Chicago with KRM and the North Shore Line, and because it was between these 2 major hubs and major economic engines, you had innovators and people who decided to make Racine their home become entrepreneurs and create jobs and create things and make things in neighborhoods all across the city of Racine. And so we really have to work to harken back to that tradition of Invention City. Dave was very flattering in his remarks about the city being one of the smallest cities in the world to be honored as a smart city. That's in part of that commitment to our tradition of innovation. And so our job now is to modernize our transportation system in a regional way to make sure that folks have access to opportunity. And so we're electrifying our bus fleet. We've got almost 40% of our transit fleet being all electric by the time the 4 new buses come on site next year. We've got 9 EV buses that are already in revenue service. And thanks to Senator Baldwin, which deserves a round of applause for being a real advocate for transit across the state of Wisconsin, we're going to be able to have an appropriation to power those buses with the power of the sun, putting solar at our transit garage. And so we are grateful for that elected leadership that says this is a priority. So thank you for putting this together.
Thank you. Thank you guys for your comments. We're going to jump right into taking off of what was just discussed in terms of in terms of innovation. We're seeing more support than ever among suburban leaders for expanding transit. What do you think is driving this? You want to start, Trevor?
Sure. The first call I got when I started this position about a year and a half ago was not from necessarily an individual rider or an elected official. It was from the Racine County Economic Development Corporation saying, we've got this employer that's considering Racine County. What can I tell them about their transportation options for their workers? And so as you have more employers that are coming to the region between Milwaukee and Chicago, you're going to have more pressure on local elected officials to solve some problems for those employers in making it an environment conducive to them moving their operations there. We're very fortunate in the city of Racine to have Summit Packaging announce a $30 million investment at one of our industrial parks. And they had a choice. They were going to choose either where the company's original headquarters is in New Hampshire or create 145 new jobs in Racine. And they chose Racine because of a myriad of reasons, but in large part because there was access to workforce via transit. And that made waves with our county leaders, that made waves with our local elected leaders in the city. And that's true outside of just the city of Racine limits in Mount Pleasant, in Sturtevant, in Caledonia, and north-south. And so I think the market is really creating that pressure for suburban leaders.
Would you guys like to follow up?
Yes, the pressure in Wauwatosa, again, is that pressure on our roads. We can't expand anymore. We don't want to expand anymore. We don't want the roads to be as big as they are on the west side. We have those 16 million people coming into Mayfair. We have almost that many coming into the medical center. We've got the Mayfair Collection. We've got Briggs and Stratton. We've got people commuting to downtown Milwaukee and out to Waukesha County. Wauwatosa is in a unique position. Paul, I'm trying to remember, Kathy Eli can help me with this, but members of the Waukesha County Board said to me years ago, you know, you guys are the bridge to Milwaukee County for Waukesha. We are. We're surrounded on 3 sides by the city of Milwaukee, and on the other side we have the city of Brookfield, a little bit of West Dallas as well. We are the bridge, and we are in the center of the metro area, the busiest freeway interchange in the state, hits our southwest corner. We have all that employment. We are desperate to make sure that we maintain the character of our community, and we can't do that if roads get wider and wider and wider and traffic chokes us, and that's what's going on. I just want to add this. When I talk about wide roads, it drives me crazy. And I think it drives a lot of people in this room crazy based on the applause I got earlier. Every time you widen a road, you take away my tax base. Every time you widen a road, I've got to pay more to maintain that road. Every time you widen a road, I've got to pay more to send snowplows out to take care of that. You're taking away my ability to take care of my constituents at a time when we are 100%, almost 100% relying on the property tax. That's unsustainable. What is sustainable is mass transit, and that's why we're all in this room today.
And you're fully built out, too.
And we're pretty much fully built out.
I have, in addition to what's already been said, I think looking at it from my viewpoint, what we have is the reason there's more support is recognition that as a region we need more workers. As a region, not everyone recognition that not everyone can afford or has a means to drive a car, and that President Transit only partially fills the gaps. We got to do a better job of basically handling the workday migration that goes from Waukesha to Milwaukee, from Racine to Milwaukee, or the other way. And yeah, Wauwatosa is right in the middle of it too. But the other thing, other than I think the recognition has significantly increased in the last 10 years. One of the things, though, that really struck me was when Amazon put out, feelers for a new headquarters, and their requirements was a really robust transit system. And if you didn't have one, you're pretty much out of it. So I know, Waukesha, we put together as much as we could about our transit system. I'm sure Racine did, Milwaukee did, and everyone did. But I can tell you that we probably didn't meet the requirements. Maybe Milwaukee did. But that was kind of a light bulb moment for a lot of people in, let's say, in Waukesha County, that you aren't going to get that type of development if you don't have the transit.
If I could jump in and add something. One way to show how Wauwatosa is kind of the bridge. You talk about Racine being connected to Chicago, being connected to Milwaukee. Years ago, I attended a symposium, I think it was at the University Club, about bringing Chicago and Milwaukee closer together, and that's happening. I mean, even in graduate school in the 70s on the East Coast, I heard people talk about Chipets, Chicago to Pittsburgh, and Bosnia-Wash, Boston to New York to Washington, and we're seeing all that. It's the megalopolis. But we have the great medical centers in Chicago and the great research in Chicago. We have great research in Milwaukee at UWM and the Medical College of Wisconsin, which happens to be in Wauwatosa. And then we have this great campus up in Madison. We need to connect with the train that we've been talking about for so long, and it's going to come right through Wauwatosa, because if you're going to connect Chicago to the research in Wisconsin, you're going to go to Wauwatosa, and then you're going to go to Madison, right? And we have the UWM satellite campus out there too. So when we're talking about transit, let's also, someone mentioned the Hiawatha earlier, but let's not forget the importance of those train connections as well. I wanted to say in my History of Wauwatosa lecture earlier that the first train ride in Wisconsin went from Milwaukee to Wauwatosa in 1850. It was a 12-minute train ride. And we have the main line from Chicago to Seattle coming through our community. Those connections are the ones that created Milwaukee and Wauwatosa. And they're going to create these connections from Chicago to Kenosha to Racine to Milwaukee to Wauwatosa to Oconomowoc to Madison, and that's what we have to do as well. Those are the sorts of things that need to drive us.
Nice segue into my next question. And what does being connected to Milwaukee mean for your communities, your businesses, and your residents? And not just Milwaukee. Again, think about it from the standpoint of a regional approach. So if we're looking at Minneapolis, if we're looking at Chicago, if we're looking at Milwaukee, and we do know that Amtrak is looking to expand their, what I call the baby builder, from Minneapolis to Milwaukee to Chicago. What does that mean for your residents and for businesses that might be thinking about your communities as their next place to expand?
I guess my thought is that in the last 10 years, there's definitely been the business community sees not so much the city of Waukesha or the city of Brookfield or Wauwatosa or Milwaukee alone. They see it as a region. They really, I mean, how many people in Waukesha work in Milwaukee? How many people in Milwaukee work in Waukesha? The other thing is you have, for entertainment, a lot of it goes into Milwaukee. You have the Brewers and the Bucks and everything in the dining and the all the entertainment that's happening. Politicians always think about where those lines are between, I even always will think about it just, where's the village of Waukesha and where's the city of Waukesha, which no one really else cares about. But a lot of people will also, a lot of politicians will also think about 124th Street and where that line is. The common person rarely, if ever, thinks about it, except maybe when they pay their taxes. What I am seeing, though, is a business community and the Chambers of Commerce and the Waukesha County Business Alliance, and I'm sure the other business alliances or whatever you have in your county really are fully cognizant of the fact that if it's not just whether our little area succeeds, it's whether the whole area succeeds. That's what I see as a big change.
When I went to law school in New York, I didn't say I was from Wauwatosa. First of all, most people didn't even know where Milwaukee was. But if to the extent that they knew anything, they certainly didn't know Wauwatosa. My roommate said he picked me because he had a choice between somebody from Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, and Mule Jaw, Texas. So Wauwatosa sounded better to him. But people knew more or less where Milwaukee was, and we are part of Milwaukee. And I've always said, when Mayor Johnson took office, and I've said this to him several times, and he said this earlier, Wauwatosa can't succeed without Milwaukee. Waukesha can't succeed without Milwaukee. Racine can't succeed without Milwaukee. We can't succeed without each other. And just this morning, well, yesterday I had a discussion, and this morning our staff was carrying this out, but developers are trying to get us into a bidding war over an industrial location, shall I say. I won't reveal it more than that. And we said, no, we're not gonna get in a bidding war with Waukesha and Menominee Falls and Glendale. That doesn't help the community. We are all rising and sinking together in the same boat.
That's an excellent question, in large part because we've seen the impacts of being regionally connected. You eloquently talk about the history of commuter rail in southeastern Wisconsin, and I want to provide a shout out to Kevin and SewerPAC for providing excellent data around the numbers of impact that it would make to have those types of services. If we had KRM, the commuter rail between Milwaukee and Chicago, in the city of Racine, our residents would have access to over 400,000 jobs within 30 minutes of transit. And you know where the station is? It's in the Lincoln King neighborhood in the city of Racine. That's the most diverse and integrated census tract in the state of Wisconsin. It's also one of the poorest census tracts in the state. So you're talking about equity, you're talking about jobs, and you're talking about newfound investment in these areas that haven't seen that type of investment in generations. And so when we talk about regional connectivity, it goes down to the neighborhood. And so, we have these great conversations around cooperation and what it means to work together and having that optimistic and aspirational attitude, but it really comes down block to block in whatever neighborhood you're in that benefits from regionalism. And that's very true in Racine.
Okay, I just got to follow up, and it really has nothing to do about transportation, but Dennis already talked about how when he went to school out in New York, he said he's from Milwaukee, and they picked that. I was working out in San Diego, and I was talking to someone on the beach, and
I wasn't on the beach in New York.
Yeah. So they said, you have a really funny accent. Where are you from? And I said, Milwaukee, and they said, oh, Canadian.
Like holy cry, hey.
Yeah. So I just had to add that.
Excellent. So just a couple more questions. What can other cities learn from your communities, Waukesha, Racine, Wauwatosa, when they look at safe, reliable transportation, including walking and biking?
That's an excellent question, and I want to preface it with, we've got some serious leaders in this industry in this room. Donna, Brian, starting this job not too long ago, there's something to be said about the professional community of those working in transit and how we lean on one another. And so just thank you for this being a real community of professionals. But the city of Racine is up to some really exciting things around public transportation. Our mayor not too long ago when the federal government stepped away from the Paris Climate Accord, said the city of Racine is going to make a stand in the interest of the environment. And the Common Council unanimously voted for the city of Racine to enter, in spirit, the Paris Climate Accord. And because of that, that put a lot of things in motion related to sustainability, savings, and service in our transit system. We've pursued money from the Volkswagen settlement agreement for EV buses. We've pursued money in the Federal Transit Administration's Lono program. And after a couple of years, we've received over $13 million in funding for 9 new all-electric buses that are in revenue service today in the city of Racine, and 4 that are on the way. And fortunately, because of Mayor Corey and Senator Baldwin, we've got an appropriation for solar coming to the site. So I describe it as the 3 S's. Number 1, service. What are we doing to make sure that our riders, our passengers, have the best experience on the bus? And having a new bus is nice. The actual experience of boarding makes a difference when it's new and improved. Secondly, savings. The city of Racine spends too much money on diesel. And so to be able to reduce that is making a difference on our bottom line. And then sustainability. With these 13 all-electric buses, we're going to be able to reduce our carbon footprint by approximately 840, I think it's tons of CO2 now being released into the atmosphere. So that's the exciting stuff we're doing there. But my hope and my dream, and I see James Davies in the crowd here with Bubbler Bikes, who, by the way, Davies was a former mayor of the city of Racine, Owen Davies, in the 80s. So I gravitated towards James right when I saw his name tag. And but we would love to see bike share, scooter share, and have this be a multimodal transportation system that's regional and block to block.
In Wauwatosa, we've tried to do everything we can to make it a livable city. We have a complete streets program that we've had for many years now. We have a bike ped committee that is made up of talented citizens who advise us. Every time we do a road project, we try to put in bike lanes that are safe and close and connected. And we are fortunate to have the Oak Leaf Bike Trail come through as well. We've been part of the Bubbler Bike program from the beginning. I happily took an e-bike ride with Mayor Johnson from 64th and North in Wauwatosa to 56th and North in Milwaukee earlier this year. I didn't know how to turn on the e-bike part, so I was actually pedaling up the hill the old way. But I'll figure it out. He's half my age, so he knows how to do it. And Carolyn Aswine and others, we've been talking about the work we did in our old village business district. We spent $20 million upgrading that. We needed new water mains and sewer mains and all. But one of the things is we had a charrette, a workshop, before we, as part of this, 400 people showed up, and I'd say it's 398 said, we want wider sidewalks, we want a more pedestrian-friendly village district. And we have wider sidewalks now. Everybody who drives through on State Street gripes about, oh, it's so slow during rush hour. Who cares? You know, we're a lot safer and everybody loves it, and it's a festival site now, and it's wonderful. So we do all that, but what we are really doing too is, again, as a community, we support regional transit efforts. Sometimes it's hard getting it through the council, but we always get it done. And I'm happy to have Alderman Joe Phillips with us today as another example of that commitment, and of course Mayor Eli is the head of Mobilize. So this has been going on for a while. Wauwatosa's behind that. And we want to make sure we get people from Milwaukee into our community for jobs and visits and all that, and maybe increase our diverse population. That's growing. We want to make sure that happens. Again, we're all in the same boat together. We rise or fall together. We can't survive unless we're all surviving.
So Waukesha is working quietly, I guess is the best way to say it, to make sure that the transit system continues to improve. And what we do see is that the corridor from Waukesha to Milwaukee is very important. The other thing, right in the city, we have pretty much every single street we have, it has sidewalks. Where there are gaps, we're working to finish those. It was just about 5 years ago, pretty much told the staff that we have to have a plan for how we finish our gaps and our sidewalks and stuff like that. And we now have that plan, and now we have to fight every time we put in. People are opposed to sidewalks sometimes. It's amazing. They don't like the paying for them, I think, is the biggest thing.
They don't like shoveling the snow.
Yeah, and especially so the walkability of the city of Waukesha is, I think, is exemplary. Pretty much you can walk anywhere. There's where there are gaps, we're fixing them. Bike routes, we're quietly working on finishing any place where there are gaps. And this summer we just completed it right off the bypass. Actually, it's behind Eaton, off of Lincoln Street. I don't expect any people to really understand where that is, but it was one of those things where people coming into Waukesha from the east were just routed onto roads without really any signage. Now we have a great connection where we do have a bike path going through an industrial area, and then you're on the bike paths that can go all the way out of Waukesha the other way. So we're doing it quietly. I would say to the west of us and to the south of us, you aren't going to get as much in the way of infrastructure in regards to walkability or bikes, unless you want to ride on the county highways and stuff like that. But from Waukesha, going east is very walkable, very bikeable.
I will say that you guys have rustic roads through your area, which is a nice connection.
Well, and I'm going to say that's probably, here I'm going to go on the jurisdictional lines. That's probably not in the city of Waukesha. That would be out in Waukesha County. Yes, there's a lot of rustic roads. I think the other thing that I didn't mention was we have invested a tremendous amount of money in our transit system. Our transit facility is pretty much very large, and that's a game changer for
We're jealous of your
a community
facility
like
in
ours.
Racine.
Well, good. I'm glad you're jealous.
We're working on it.
That's why I'm in the middle.
But I do want to point out another thing that I'm jealous about, which is the coordination between Waukesha Transit and MCTS. I had the privilege of hanging out with Brian the other day where we could see the new BRT stop, and not only is that integrated and you see those shared stops, but to be able to pay on your phone for a ride between a Waukesha Transit and MCTS, how cool is that? So count us in Racine.
I should have added that the Milwaukee Regional Medical Center, Sherry Schmidt was mentioned earlier. She's absolutely fabulous. She's wonderful to work with. She's the transportation coordinator at MRMC, came from the DOT after she got religion. She has partnered with Waukesha Metro and with the Washington County system and with MCTS. MRMC is becoming a de facto transit hub for the region, and that's part of the planning out there. So I just wanted to give her a shout out for that too.
And it doesn't surprise me that Trevor knows more about the technology for the Waukesha Metro than I know.
Well, final question. What does the next 10 years look like in terms of regional vision for the transportation system? And I'll kick it off. You already spoke about just the integration of our various systems and looking at how we might be able to connect between communities, between jurisdictions. And that's being done without someone saying, thou shalt have a regional transportation authority. It's being done because it's the right thing to do. So give us some sense of what that 10-year vision might be.
I'm very optimistic. I mean, we are working, as you already indicated, we're working on it right now, and it's being done by the communities without a hammer over their head or anything. So I'm very optimistic. I also am optimistic because I think technology is going to provide a lot of solutions. The last mile is always an issue. I don't think you're going to be able to have 60-foot buses going everywhere, so the last mile is very, very important. There's a lot of support for trying to figure out ways to do the last mile, and I think technology will be one of the ways that is solved. The other thing I have to say is, and we haven't really said, I wasn't here all morning, but one of the things we haven't talked about is that the amount of federal, state, and local money spent on the transportation system is absolutely enormous, and transit is the stepchild of it. And I don't think people recognize how much money they have that is their money that's going to pay for what is our transportation system. It's just expected. You don't think about it, that you're paying for the wider roads in Wauwatosa, and there's advantages and disadvantages for all that. But I do see in 10 years, within 10 years, basically the public recognizing that we have an enormous expenditure, and we can easily change how we divide that pot up in our expenditures for transportation.
I think that was very well put, and I'm no longer jealous. So one of the things that we think about in 10 years in Racine is how do we achieve a renaissance, or as we say, a Racine-essence for transit to the south of Milwaukee. But long term, it's going to be the 5 T's that are going to contribute to Racine's success. We talked about the 3 S's, now it's the 5 T's. So first, technology. What are we doing around technology to make it easier for folks to engage in the system? Second, it's training and access to training. For the first time in the City of Racine's transportation history, we have an agreement with our technical college system where students are able to ride for free. Third, it's talent. There's an expectation of skilled labor, that there are systems of mass transit and public transportation in the communities that they want to live, work, and play in. And then there's tourism. What are we doing to welcome people to, in my opinion, the most beautiful region in the United States, to spend their money and contribute to the quality of life we have here? And the 5th T is transportation. So if you combine those 5 T's with the 3 S's of savings, service, and sustainability, that's going to be what the future is.
What does it spell?
So one thing I learned today is who the next mayor or Racine County executive is going to be. What I see in 10 years, first of all, is an expanded BRT network. And for 25 years, I commuted on what became the Gold Line downtown to the Rice Building. And I always knew that 27th Street was the spot where you were going to connect, because so many people get on and off the Gold Line at 27th Street. It's just obvious. That's got to happen. What I also see is the BRT going all the way out to the city of Waukesha. Blue Mountain Road, which is Highway 18, it was a territorial road back in the 1840s. It's been there forever. It connects Milwaukee with the city of Waukesha and beyond. It's a natural, because the BRT is going to go to the medical center, but it's going down Blue Mountain Road. So by the way, folks, here's an inside trading tip. If you want to make a lot of money, buy land on Blue Mountain Road. I'm serious. We all know about transit-oriented development. Look what's going on with the HOP. As soon as the BRT goes in there, all those old buildings on Blue Mountain Road are going to go down. So that's what I see. I see a lot of development in the city of Milwaukee and the city of Wauwatosa and on into the city of Waukesha, which has fabulous history. I see more connections with the HOP, and I want to see UWM connected to the whole network too, because we need to do that. I see all those things happening for the reasons that Mayor Reilly just said, and what Donna Martin just said. We aren't doing this because there's a hammer. We're doing it because it makes sense. If we're going to make this great region greater, we're going to have a better transit system. And what's great is government leaders have been saying this for a long time. Transit leaders have been saying it even longer, and business leaders are saying it now. So I see the future as business-driven, more than government-driven, more than transit advocate-driven, because people need employees. They need to make their businesses work. Racine's going to have its Racine-essence, and everyone else is going to benefit from that.
But it'll take the train. We need KRMs, so.
The mayor tells you that.
Well, one final thing that I actually is in my notes that I forgot to mention was looking out a decade, I see a lot less car ownership. I think people organically will move away from cars if they're going to be able to, and they will. I mean, it may be car sharing, but I see a lot less cars, which means transit needs to be larger.
Well, thank you, all of you. Can we have a hand for our mayors and